Oh boy, here we go. This will most definitely be my most difficult top 10 to make so far. I've been a long-time fan of the Final Fantasy series, and there are so many great games at my disposal. The only games I'm going to tell you that aren't on the list are Final Fantasy 11 and 14. They're both MMORPGs, and it takes a lot for me to play MMOs, so I've never actually played them. Everything else is fair game. Remember, these are my top 10 Final Fantasy games, and with so many entries in the series, I can almost guarantee that nobody's top 10 will be the same. So be sure to tell me yours in the comments below. Now let's begin.
Number 10.
Number 10 is the game that started it all. Final Fantasy was originally released on the NES and was one of the earliest turn-based JRPGs of all time. You create your party, which can be made up of a decent variety of job classes. I prefer to play with a thief, warrior, karate guy, and mage, but you can play however you like. You start off rescuing the princess from Garland, but the story is so much more than this. With an entire world at your disposal, the original Final Fantasy was actually a pretty massive game at the time. But how does this one hold up today? Well, the NES version, in my opinion, not so well. Fortunately for all of us, Final Fantasy I has been remade and re-released on multiple different consoles over time. My personal favorite being the PS1 version released in Final Fantasy Origins. I think the reason I love this game so much is that compared to some of the others in the franchise, this one can be so easy to just pick up and play. It's got tons of replayability too, what with all the different job class combinations you can choose from. Final Fantasy I is clearly not the best the franchise has to offer, but it's still the one that I'll pop in and play from time to time, so it deserves its place at number 10.
Number 9.
Final Fantasy VI is a great game with a great story that suffers from having a cast of characters half consisted of either terrible or optional characters. The story and pacing of the game is just fantastic for the first half. Locke, Terra, Sabin, Edgar, and even Mog are all pretty great characters. But then you've got the bottom feeders like Umaro, Strago, and Gao. There are 14 playable characters in this game, and maybe only 6 or 7 of them are good. Some having nothing at all to do with the story. Speaking of the story, it starts off so amazing, then peters out into get your guys back and fight the bad guy in World of Ruin. I absolutely hated World of Ruin. You're stuck with only Celeste at the start, who I'm not a big fan of, and you have to go around the entire world doing lengthy, mostly unenjoyable quests to get your party members back. The worst part is getting back my favorite character, Locke. It's such a long dungeon that requires splitting up the party into teams. That's another thing I never liked about Final Fantasy VI. It boasts this massive 14-person party that's 50% bums, so it splits the party every chance it gets. Just let me play as who I like, damn it! All in all, Final Fantasy VI is a pretty good game. It's just one that I always find tedious to play. The story and world is really well done, but it quite literally falls apart in World of Ruin.
Number 8.
Number 8 is a game that's always being hyped by the fanbase. Whether it's just because I didn't play this one until years after playing through Final Fantasy 8 to 10, or the story just didn't appeal to me as much as it has others, Final Fantasy VII has fought its way to number 8 on the list. Don't get me wrong though, Final Fantasy VII is still a great game. I love a lot of the characters, and the combat is pretty fun. Final Fantasy VII also has some of the best summons in the franchise. With the infinitely badass Knights of the Round and 3 different forms of Bahamut, its summon roster can't be beat. I also think Final Fantasy VII probably has one of the best limit break mechanics in the entire franchise, and it definitely has the best optional bosses the series has to offer. Some of the things that really hold this one back for me is the fact that I really don't like the materia system. The minigames and the way you catch chocobos in this game are also god-awful. The game would have been better off without them. This game deserves its spot at number 8 though because of its strong, mostly likable characters and incredible soundtrack. not to mention its impact on the gaming world when it first came out.
Number 7.
Alright, so this may be a controversial pick for many, but hear me out. Final Fantasy VIII was the game that really got me into the Final Fantasy series. I'd played bits and pieces of Final Fantasy I on the NES and Final Fantasy IV and VI on the Super NES, but Final Fantasy VIII was the first one that I played when I both owned the game and was old enough to know what the hell was going on. I love the junction system and how it can be used to completely break the game if you know what you're doing. I understand why people don't like this one though. Squall isn't the most relatable character, and Selphie and Irvin might as well not exist as far as the plot goes. The draw system can be a complete pain in the ass, but if you get good at Triple Triad, you'll almost never have to use it. Speaking of Triple Triad, that has got to be the best minigame in the entire series. I've probably spent and enjoyed more time playing Triple Triad than I've spent playing Final Fantasy VI and VII combined. I just love this game. Back to Irvin and Selphie for a minute. While Selphie is one of my least favorite characters in the game, her limit breaks can be one of the best ever in a sticky situation. She even has an ability called the End, which kills whoever you're fighting in one hit no matter what. It can only be used once per game, and you have to be lucky enough for it to show up. Irvin, on the other hand, is probably the most useful character in combat, thanks to his limit break combined with the fast ammo. Dude can just mow enemies down, all this combined with a story that keeps you coming back for more, and a great cast of summons, makes Final Fantasy VIII one of my favorites in the series, and locks it in at number 7 on my list.
Number 6.
Final Fantasy XII tried new things and for the most part succeeded. I absolutely loved the Gambit system, the world, and the side quests in this game. Like Final Fantasy VI, it did kinda have a few crappy characters like Vaughn and Penelo, but it makes up for it by having some really great ones like Bosch, Ash, and Balthier. Final Fantasy XII is massive, and pretty much the entire world can be walked on foot, which was nice to have back after Final Fantasy X's mostly hallwayed world. There are so many different locations, dungeons, and secrets to explore. You can get past Final Fantasy bosses like Zeromus and Chaos as Espers, and my boy Gilgamesh is in here too! Probably my favorite Easter egg in this entire game is the Worm Hero Blade, which is an extremely powerful weapon that can be equipped by everyone. The Worm Hero Blade is of course the Sword of Light, or Erdrick's Sword, from the Dragon Quest series. It slows down whoever has it equipped, but just slap haste on them and prepare to destroy all that's standing in your way. Final Fantasy XII sits at number 7 because of how immersive and alive its world feels, and how much I love the Gambit system. It would have been higher if not for the boring-ass story. It absolutely nails it at some parts, but can put me completely to sleep at others. If you're going to play this game, I recommend picking up the Zodiac Age Remaster for the sexy job classes and handy new features.
Number 5.
I just finished talking about how Final Fantasy XII's world map was so much better done than Final Fantasy X's, so how could 10 be ranked higher? Where 10 excels for me and most others is its story. I'm going to go ahead and say that Final Fantasy X may just have been the best told story in the entire franchise. There are so many different factors and viewpoints to consider in its story, and it's not until around the halfway point that the player is even given the most important opinions from the party members. With so many twists and turns and one of the most well-developed parties on the list so far, not to mention having my favorite battle system, Final Fantasy X stands strong at number 5.
Number 4.
Final Fantasy V is the funnest game in the entire franchise. It's got a fairly decent story, but its gameplay and sense of humor are what sets it apart from the others. The job system is back and better than ever, with so many different jobs to choose from and the ability to keep abilities from one job while switching to another. This game is always a blast to play. The characters are also all very likable, and you get to explore two vastly different worlds. Final Fantasy V is also the first game to star my favorite Final Fantasy character ever, Gilgamesh. The battle with Gilgamesh on the Big Bridge is one of the most memorable moments in the entire series for me. I love how much the game is able to tell a great story without taking itself too seriously. All these reasons are why it's all the way up here at number 4.
Number 3.
If you take almost everything I love about Final Fantasy V and give it a much better story and somehow an even better job system, you end up with Final Fantasy Tactics. This was the first tactical RPG I had ever played, and it set the bar really damn high. No joke, I love me some Shining Force and Ogre Battle, but I think Final Fantasy Tactics and Tactics Ogre the Knight of Lotus are the best of the genre. Final Fantasy Tactics has one of the best stories while still having a completely customizable party that can also include monsters from the Final Fantasy series. The world and its characters are so realistically portrayed compared to pretty much every other game in the series. Nothing's ever black or white, every single character has a valid reason for their actions in the game. The difficulty is also perfect. There are a few fights in the game where it gets incredibly difficult, but this encourages proper preparation and strategy to beat, making Tactics a very satisfying experience overall.
Number 2.
This is where things get incredibly difficult for me. I love these next two games, and it was so hard to put one of them as number 2 instead of number 1. But honestly, I had to drop Final Fantasy IV down in number 2. Final Fantasy IV is one of the greatest games ever made. I love the characters, the world, the story, the combat, and the emotions this game makes me feel. It tells its story so well, and all the characters, even the Spoony Bard himself, are so fleshed out and well done. There are characters I don't like, however, like Edward, Palom, and Porum, but they all serve their purpose to the amazing story. For having 3 great worlds to explore, an incredible cast and story, Final Fantasy IV sits high at number 2 on the list. I'd say the only thing that holds it back from being number 1 is how long and tedious I always find the final segment to be. It's not bad per se, but the pacing really goes to shit near the end of the game. If you're going to play this bad boy, I really recommend either the PS1 version included in Final Fantasy Chronicles alongside Chrono Trigger, or the PSP version. You really can't go wrong with the DS version as well.
Number 1.
Here we are, my favorite Final Fantasy game of all time. It was a hard decision to make between this and Final Fantasy IV, but I had to give the edge to Final Fantasy IX. To me, Final Fantasy IX had every single thing I loved about all the other games in the franchise. It had lovable characters, all with different job classes and styles of play, an amazing multiple world encompassing story, some great side quests, and something that I consider to be a very important necessity to the franchise: 4 motherfucking fiends! I know compared to Final Fantasy 1 and 2, their lore is significantly downplayed in 9, but they're still an important part of this game that needs to be mentioned. Final Fantasy IX is quite literally a love letter to the fans of the franchise, and was the last Final Fantasy game created by series creator Hironobu Sakaguchi before he left the company. Sakaguchi poured his entire heart and soul into this game, and you can really tell. For being, in my opinion, the perfect Final Fantasy story and world, and despite having a few bum characters like Freya and Eiko, Final Fantasy IX deserves its spot at the top of the heap at number 1! Thanks a lot for watching this video, guys. If you enjoyed it, be sure to click that like button and smash subscribe. You can also check out my Twitch channel at twitch.tv/Dookie03 to join me live at least 3 nights a week. I'm currently playing Xenogears for the first time ever. I'd also like to give a shout out to Oni Black Mage here on YouTube. He does these incredible What Happened in Final Fantasy videos, which is where most of the footage in this top 10 comes from. Normally I like to use my own footage, but there are a lot of lengthy games in here, so I had to go elsewhere. Again, thanks for watching and have yourselves a great day.